Alright folks, now that I've covered both Stick of Truth and Fractured But Whole far more thoroughly than I ever anticipated, it's time for some good old-fashioned hype and speculation. Because there is a third South Park game currently in development, and while we don't know a ton about it, there are some really interesting rumors and lots of possibilities for themes, locations, and gameplay. But I also have a personal game pitch for the sequel, which I'll break down last, so let's go on down to South Park, have ourselves a time. Okay, so first off, we can break down the very few things that we do know about the upcoming game, as vague as they are. For one, we know it exists. It was part of the huge $900 million deal made in 2021 that renewed the show through season 30 and sent 14 specials to Paramount+. 2, the game is being developed by THQ Nordic. They revealed a nothing of a teaser trailer, basically just confirming that the game is in development. Here's that if you want to see it.
Hot, 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 hot! Ah! Oh, it's coming!
And the last little tidbit we have is small but significant, and it came from Matt Stone himself in an interview with Bloomberg after their last big contract went through, talking about upcoming projects outside of South Park the series. Part of the quote is, "These are multi-year projects we invested a bunch of money in. We have a South Park 3D video game, release date unknown." The eyebrow-raising aspect of this quote here is 3D, which would obviously be a departure from the way Stick of Truth and Fractured But Whole operated. Both of those games have a fully explorable South Park, but set on multiple 2D planes. You can explore as you desire, but the camera angles are fixed in a certain direction. 3D obviously implies a fully movable camera that can rotate 360 degrees, giving us a completely new perspective when exploring South Park. At first, this idea rubbed me the wrong way. It felt like the last two games had really nailed the formula for an explorable South Park, and since the show itself isn't exactly a three-dimensional world, this felt like it would take away the feeling of being in a South Park story. However, I also know that Matt and Trey are absolute perfectionists when it comes to these things, and they definitely would not be attempting this without serious quality control in mind. And what I think we could expect to see is something akin to the South Park title sequence that has been around for the past 6 or 7 years. The sequence does a great job maintaining the cardboard cutout feel of South Park, but fitting it into a more three-dimensional space. I've always really admired this title sequence, and I think there's a reason they haven't changed it since it came out. And if they can deliver something that looks and feels like this in-game, I am 100% for it. But obviously the other huge question after getting fantasy and superhero adventures is, what can we expect the theme for the upcoming game to be? Both games drew from existing South Park episodes for inspiration, Stick of Truth initially drawing from the Return of the Fellowship to the Two Towers, though obviously expanding on the fantasy aspects a lot. And Fractured But Whole building around the handful of superhero episodes in the series, also expanding on the characters and abilities. So for the new game, would they draw from existing episodes for theming, or would they just build out something entirely new from the ground up this time? There are a ton of episodes that could make for good inspirations, so let's break down possible themes one by one.
Bullcrap. Titanium alloy, my ass.
Season 8's Good Times with Weapons is an absolute fan favorite episode for good reason. It's genuinely one of the best the series has ever produced. But beyond the episode's quality, it's also another great example of the kids' imaginations running wild. After they purchased dangerous ninja weapons at the fair, the kids imagined themselves in more anime-style animation with super ninja abilities. We're even treated to an anime version of Professor Chaos in this episode, of course before Kenny throws a ninja star in his eye. This is not only a fan favorite episode, but feels like a theme that is primed to be expanded on. Trey is a huge fan of Japanese culture. I expect he'd have a ton of fun going full anime for a sequel. Plus, if we could get an entire soundtrack of songs like Let's Fighting Love, it would 100% be worth it.
What am I gonna do? My little brother's been abducted by aliens. You farted.
This is a little bit more vague because South Park has covered so much in the genre over the years, but going straight up sci-fi would make a ton of sense as well. The literal pilot episode featured visitors coming down and abducting Ike, obviously something that was paid tribute to back in Stick of Truth as well, but sci-fi ideas are intrinsically tied to South Park's history, and it could be really cool to see them finally tie all of these disparate alien stories together in a bigger way. Planet Marklar from Starvin' Marvin in Space, the Juvians from Cancelled, the atheistic future from Go God Go, or the Space Cash shenanigans from Pinewood Derby. There are tons of space possibilities built around existing episodes. Maybe we could see some kind of galactic council of aliens to showcase the representation from all of the species seen throughout the series. It's also been firmly established in the Fractured But Whole that the new kid's farts have time-bending capabilities, and we literally saw him travel through time already, so seeing the future from the Go God Go episodes could be in the cards, though that future was continually altered thanks to Cartman's antics with the Crank Prank time phone. There are also other sci-fi stories that they could build on, Jeff Bezos being like those Star Trek Trek aliens in Season 22, the celebrity holograms from Season 18, or even the living advertisements from Season 19, all interesting sci-fi ideas they could use. Though sci-fi and the ability to time travel do play majorly into my South Park game pitch, so stick around till the end of this video to hear that.
Yeah, you like that, don't you, bitch?
One place that South Park has never been afraid to go is hell. Satan was introduced back in Season 1, and major chunks of the South Park movie take place in hell itself. Episodes like Do the Handicap Go to Hell, Probably, Best Friends Forever, and Hell on Earth 2006 all feature hell pretty heavily. There are even quests from South Park The Stick of Truth that were intended to be set in hell but were cut from the game. They've also featured heaven a couple of times as well, though generally less comprehensively. We really get the best look at heaven in Best Friends Forever when Kenny has to command the forces of heaven versus the forces of hell, though we don't really get a good look at the battle itself. Obviously, a battle of the afterlife would be one way to really escalate the theming of these games, but I also think it could be a fun way to follow up some South Park stories from the past few seasons. In the episode Nobody Got Cereal, Satan dies fighting to protect the Earth from Man Bear Pig, and as the boys cry over his dead body, his good deeds grant him his angel wings, ascending him to heaven. We've yet to see what the ramifications of this event are for both heaven or hell. Who is ruling hell now? Also, will Satan have to run into his ex, Saddam Hussein, who was banished to heaven from hell in Season 4? Focusing on a heaven versus hell conflict would provide massive scale for a video game, and allow for some fun connection to the series' history.
You will listen to me.
It's no secret that Matt and Trey are big Lovecraft fans. They've said as much on DVD commentaries, and obviously Cthulhu and the Sunken City are both heavily featured in Season 14's superhero trilogy. They even had a really impressive boss battle in the Fractured But Whole against a Lovecraftian god whose name I will not say. But not only that, the superhero trilogy heavily implies that Kenny's immortal origins are actually tied to the Lost City and have Lovecraftian roots. I think a Lovecraft-inspired theme could actually be one of the coolest possibilities for a South Park follow-up, and it could also finally give us a firm explanation and reveal for Kenny's Lovecraftian origins. I think a huge event video game would be a really great place for that kind of major lore reveal.
Imagination!
Are you gonna take us somewhere or not?
The one thing I hear most when people pitch an idea for Game 3 is Imaginationland, and I get it. There are just so many possibilities, both as a location to visit and as a potential focus for the game. The Imaginationland trilogy remains one of the most fun series of episodes in the show's history. The epic locations, the sheer number of fictional characters on display, these make it such an enticing pitch. However, as much as I'd love this, I think with the legal hoops they'd have to jump through for the idea, it's not likely. It doesn't seem like South Park is afforded quite the same level of freedom in its games as it is in its series. Plus, I think Matt and Trey are more interested in crafting their own world than they are copy-pasting tons of other characters from history into this one. As much as I understand people's desires to see this, I wouldn't count on it. And I also think there's just much more possibility for narrative satisfaction if they aren't tied down by all of these other IPs. But we'll see. Okay, now that we've gone over some theme ideas, let's talk about locations and some of the ways we can expect South Park to change from the previous game. Between Stick of Truth and Fractured But Whole, we got a pretty substantially overhauled South Park, in large part thanks to some of the changes we saw on the show in Season 19. But since then, there have been some other pretty substantial additions to South Park itself. I don't think there is any way we will see a new South Park game that doesn't include Tegrity Farms, which has become one of the primary locations since Season 23. And the area has been slowly expanding as well, with the addition of Credigree Farms across the street last year. Season 25 also saw Cartman move into a hot dog-shaped house a bit outside of town, and then in Season 26, this was converted into a huge theme restaurant called Dick and Bow's Hot Dogs, before Cartman eventually moved back into his old house. I think this is another surefire area we can expect to be able to explore in an upcoming game. I also mentioned earlier the possibilities of exploring further outside South Park, sort of like some quests we saw in Stick of Truth, which sent us to a UFO and even to an 8-bit Canada. But even if these themes don't pan out, heaven, hell, a Lovecraftian sunken city, Imaginationland, all really cool possibilities for quest locations if the game is big enough. But the potential of the 3D fully explorable South Park also gives them the ability to completely redesign South Park from the previous games, potentially fitting even more classic locations in. The way South Park is laid out in the first two games is ingenious, but it's also much more linear. The South Park intro shows a much more integrated version of the town. We could see more shops, more houses, and more paths leading to areas outside of South Park like Stark's Pond, Hell's Pass Hospital, Mephisto's Lab, Tegrity, etc. But the possibility of a fully explorable 3D South Park also leads pretty directly into my major pitch for a new South Park game. And here it is.
I'll tell you one thing. Those people are brave and deserve every ounce of our respect.
At the end of Fractured But Whole, the new kid achieves the ability to use his farts to travel through time. We see him use it a few times in the final stretch of the game, taking them to a future where Mitch Connor has taken over South Park, back to the opening sequence of the game, and even to a superhero origin story before that. The new kid's farting abilities improve each game. It would only make sense for him to fully control these time-traveling fart powers over the course of the next game. But how do you escalate those time-traveling abilities? With a fully explorable future version of South Park as seen in South Park post-COVID. That's right, baby, let's go Blade Runner sci-fi for this one. And let's take a page out of the book of one of the greatest video games of all time, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, which gave us 2 versions of Hyrule to explore, a thriving kingdom as a kid, and a dystopian nightmare as an adult. They did a ton of really great work futurizing South Park in those post-COVID specials, and though the narrative technically changed that future, I think this aesthetic would work great for a time travel focused game, to be able to fully explore South Park in the present and then see exactly how it's changed in the future. Maybe the narrative is actually about changing that future, not unlike those post-COVID specials. You discover the future is fully dystopian, but each quest slightly alters aspects of future South Park for the better thanks to your intervention. This not only makes for a cool sci-fi narrative that builds on the lore and ideas in the previous game, and draws from recent South Park specials, but it would effectively allow them to double the size of the map. The post-COVID specials were some of my favorite South Park in recent history, in part because we got to see a whole new spin on South Park itself, but I feel like only utilizing the future South Park in 2 specials was almost a little bit of a waste. They made entirely aged up models for every single character and a fully updated look for South Park. Why not explore it all even more thoroughly in a time-bending video game adventure? And that's all I got for you. I think we should definitely not expect much in terms of updates for the next South Park game for a while. Matt and Trey definitely have their hands full with Casa Bonita and the next 2 specials for the year, but hopefully we start hearing whispers of their plans sometime next year. Looking forward to that. But what are you anticipating or hoping for most from the next South Park video game? Are there any themes I missed that you'd like to see? Let me know below, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.
Johnny!
Two cellos.